What is up? We are finally live. StreamYard was having its issues, which is why we are 5 minutes late. We've actually already started the draft, but let's get into this thing. A whole new wave of Scott Fishbowl invites went out last week, or yesterday, I meant to say. And while we love Scott Fishbowl, we love all charity tournaments here, which is why we have invented the founder of the brand new Rainbow Bowl, Steve Lawson, on with us to talk about that tournament and all the great stuff that he is doing with it. So let's start this draft, which technically have already started, but let's start the show. Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. We are late because StreamYard sucks, but we still appreciate them. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, except for, running a little bit behind. Although I will say it's becoming a recurring theme of any show that I'm on with Club Fantasy that every couple of weeks another Atlanta Braves player gets hurt. And today it was announced Michael Harris is on the IL. So it's just,
you guys can't be losing many
ongoing.
more outfielders. It's going to be a rough summer for you guys.
Yeah, it's a great time in Atlanta.
Austin out here depressing Atlanta Braves fans to start multiple shows on Club Fantasy now. And our guest this week, formerly of Club Fantasy, currently with IBT in between media, founder of the Rainbow Bowl, which is why he's here with us, Stephen Lawson. How are you this morning, friend?
I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to see what we can get done today. I'm so hyped to be here.
Yeah, well, we're certainly going to finish the draft because the draft has been going on longer than the show. So, guys, let me go ahead and get the draft up on the screen here for you, which is going to take some extra clicks because everything is broken now. But that's going to be this one. Oh, my goodness, guys. I didn't even have the draft ready to go because we left the room to try to make everything work. So this is just one extra click here, and boom. Now we have a draft on the screen.
There we go.
Guys, the Rainbow Bowl is a brand new tournament that I'm going to let Steve describe to you in much more detail in just a few moments. But the long and short of the Rainbow Bowl, it is a Superflex, tight end premium, best ball format. The draft is going to be 17 rounds long. I put all 17 rounds in this draft, and I put it as a 30-second clock. Steve isn't going the full best ball 30-second clock. At least I don't believe he is. Maybe he will, but he'll tell you about that in a second. But I figured since it's best ball, we can go with a short clock. I'm going to name off our drafters, and then we'll get into the draft a little bit. So Austin picking from the 1 spot, our buddy Kevin at the 2, Desh Wayne at the 3, Waft at the 4, Brocal at the 5. Brocal got screwed over by StreamYard. He was waiting for the stream to start to know when to make his pick. So his Christian McCaffrey in the first round was an auto pick, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Allegedly.
Stone Sports. Yeah. Stone Sports from the 6th spot. Say Watt again. Great person. If you guys are not friends with him on Sleeper, he holds his own mock drafts all the time. Check out him. He's picking from the 7th spot. Duarte auto picking from the 8th spot. Fizzle Dallas from the 9th spot. Griff Girl from the 10, who I believe is actually in Rainbow Bowl. Primetime Mock from the 11. And Steve picking from the 12. So Steve, let's just get into it. Let me remind people of a couple of things. We're not going to break down every team in this draft. That is not what this show is about. This show is about learning through mock drafting. We're going to look for interesting trends. We're going to talk about different league types. This is our first time we're doing a Superflex best ball tournament. So that's going to be a big focus here. Austin and Steve will recap their drafts at the end of the show. I will pick an oops if one of you guys screws up really, really bad. But if you're here to hear about your team, if you're in the draft right now, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. We do this show for everybody, not just the 10 people who draft with us. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk to us about the Rainbow Bowl. What inspired it, what caused it, and kind of where we stand with it right now.
Yeah, so obviously LGBTQ issues are big in my life. It's who I am, what I live, and I wanted to do something to give back to my community in some way, shape, or form. And I just am always looking for the best path to do that. And how I kind of figured I would get that done really was through fantasy football. I'm a fantasy football junkie. That's kind of where I made my name in Twitter. And I was like, you know what? There's just nothing like it in the community right now. I know Scott Fish was doing the Scott Fish Bowl, and that's like an amazing tournament. It's such an inspiration for me to do this. And obviously other bowls like Warrior Bowl and Battle of the Sexes and things like that. And they're so amazing, and they're raising so much awareness and doing all this cool stuff. And I just thought to myself, like, man, that's an opportunity to really bring people together and show that like LGBTQ plus people, we exist in every space, right? Like, and there's this pervasive thought of football being a straight cis man's game. And that's just not the case. So to be able to do something for, people like me and to raise money for kids who are growing up in this really kind of interesting time to be LGBTQ, it's important to me to do this and bring some awareness.
Yeah, one of the things you said before the show was you were worried it wasn't going to fill up fast enough. I didn't really have that worry for you because you have kind of curated your Twitter following to a point where I'm not going to say you don't have your trolls. You certainly fucking have your trolls, and my God, do they come for your neck? And they're all terrible people, but we'll not talk about them much this show. But you have created really a following that supports you and supports the things you believe in. So I was not surprised when this thing filled up as quickly as it did. How many people do you have in this tournament so far?
So we right now have 120 people in the tournament right now. We have 10 leagues that are filled. We're actually about to give away the last spot on it, like later down the road. And we've got some people that you dream of inviting into it. And I just am so excited for where we're going. But yeah, we're at 120 people. We have 190 or 200 signups. So there's still room to grow.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy.
I just dropped the sign up interest form in all of our chats right now. So it'll also be in the description of this video. But if you guys are looking to join, it's a very cool cause. And that's the next thing I wanted to get to with you, Steve, is you decided to, I don't want to say partner with, but you are all proceeds that you would be able to generate from this are going towards the Trevor Project, which is obviously a very important cause. I'm not the right person to speak about the Trevor Project. I know a little, you probably know much more than me. Can you talk a little bit about why that was important for you?
Yeah, because the Trevor Project, their main goal is to provide a safe space and a place to reach out to for queer kids who are in crisis and need anybody to talk to. And growing up in that world where I was afraid of who I was and what people would say or think or do, the Trevor Project just does such important work that partnering with them was a no-brainer to me. That's where I want to make sure that the young LGBTQ people, the kids, get to become adults. And that's the goal.
There was a really cool story where it was some Midwestern or Western state, North Dakota, I think it may have been, where the governor, very right-leaning, but was making policies that were affecting young LGBTQ kids, and then saw the suicide rates of those children and went back on all of his policies, flipped it over. And his exact quote was, if changing this policy means kids get to live, I'm going to change this policy every single time. And I just feel like there's such room for common sense. And I'm not going to turn this into a hugely political show, but there's such room for common sense in our society that can just kind of blind out all of the ignorant. I love the tournament. I loved it. It was the reason I joined. And you got my good friend Kira Wojtrowski. After you had posted about it, I saw Kira immediately post about it. And I was like, well, I would be an asshole if I didn't sign up. So, and I know Austin's in, so you have the support of the good people. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on the haters, but fuck those people. And how much have you raised for the Trevor Project already?
Yeah, we're up to $1,850 as of right now. So the goal, in the pipe dream, when I started to send out invites and stuff, I'm like, what if I could get to originally it was $100, and then I was like, what if it was 500? What if it was 1,000? And now it's 1,850. Awesome. And I was like, okay, I don't even want to I just don't want to cap it anymore. I don't even want to think about a number anymore, because I'm like, what are we we're doing something that is helping in any way, shape, or form. And I've been in contact with the Trevor Project, and I'm trying to partner with them more. Yeah. And that's something that I'm looking to do either for this season or the next season of Rainbow Bowl.
All right. And I'm following that up with the donation link for anybody who would like to donate. Will also be in the chat and will later be in the description of this video. And now let's get into some of the fantasy talk. Steve, I appreciate you sharing, and you guys should be following Steve if you're not already. He always shares the ugly side of the shit he has to go through, but he does it for a really positive reason. And I think that alone is a good reason to follow him. But if you want fantasy football hot takes, you're going to hear some of them on this show. And Steve is always good for those. I think he'd be the first to admit that. Steve, the last thing I want to bug you about before we start getting into the draft itself, talk about Rainbow Bowl scoring. So this is a little different than a lot of the other leagues out there. Kind of, why did you go with what you went with, and what is it exactly?
So we're a best ball, full PPR, tight end premium. You get a half-point tight end premium in Rainbow Bowl. And I wanted to do it because I want as many players to make an impact on your team as possible. And I feel like tight end, just by the nature of the position, if it's full PPR, they just don't carry that value.
Yeah.
As adding a half point, all of a sudden takes someone who caught 60 balls, cut that in half, right? And it would be like catching 90.
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden changes the game, right? So I think it creates a much more versatile lineup and draft strategy for everybody.
I think it's fitting that you wanted everyone to be included in this very all-inclusive tournament. So I think it works out.
That's right.
That was what I discovered yesterday. I was talking to my wife. I was like, it's all-inclusive, literally in every form of the word.
That's
this
right.
Is an all-inclusive tournament. Josh put Dalton Kincaid on the thumbnail, so he really leaned on the tight end premium. And Austin, I'm going to let you talk because we've heard Steve for the first 15 minutes of this show. But what I wanted to look at, I was looking at the ADP of some of these tight ends, and I'm not even looking at the draft board right now. We'll talk about where they got drafted shortly. But are we going overboard in the fantasy community right now, Austin, with the young tight ends? When you look at Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, and even to a lesser extent, Brock Bowers, they're going ahead of established veterans. Namely, for Pitts and Kincaid, we're seeing them go ahead of Mark Andrews now after kind of a down season for Andrews. Kincaid and Pitts were the 11 and 12 last year. Brock Bowers hasn't played a snap yet. And I feel like we've hit the mystery box conundrum. Like, these young tight ends could be anything. They could even be Mark Andrews. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I feel like we might be going overboard, Austin.
Yeah, I'm very much with you on that front. Just to hit on the Kincaid note, even in tight end premium scoring, both Cole Kmet and, wait for it, Jake Ferguson outscored Dalton Kincaid last year. Ooh. In tight end premium, Dalton Kincaid only scored like 20 more points than Dallas Goedert, and he was just 7 points ahead of Dalton Schultz. So, like, come on. We don't need to go that bonkers for Dalton Kincaid. I definitely am a little suspicious of the Kincaids, the McBrides. I'm less suspicious of the Kyle Pitts. Some of that's Atlanta Falcons homerism bias, but some of it's like we've actually seen him hit 1,000-yard season in the past. But I'm a little bit, I'm kind of curious from an NFL perspective, right? I think everybody's thinking like, oh, everybody's going to try and copy the Kansas City Chiefs. They want a Travis Kelce. And so that's the model now because they've gone back to back. So I'm curious to see if that actually plays out, but I'm a little suspicious to see that it actually plays out because tight end is a hard position.
Yeah, I will say ADP wise, maybe not going with the reality of drafts, Steve, because we had Kelce go with the 212 to Austin, Andrews go with the 311, and then you took McBride. Laporta went at the 2-8. He was the first tight end off the board. So it seems like for drafters, Mark Andrews is still part of that top conversation, but ADP, so maybe not the mock. I don't know where this ADP is coming from, but I'll just continue the question with you, Steve. Does Mark Andrews belong ahead of these younger guys?
Yeah, it does. All right. So if I could have taken Mark Andrews where I took Trey McBride, I would have, right?
Okay, like literally the next question I was going to ask.
Like that's what I would have done. Like Mark Andrews is established, and it's, you know what it is? It's people get bored. People just get bored with like, oh, you're gonna draft Mark Andrews. That's not sex. Who cares? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, it's not a car, right? Like, if he's gonna put up his normal 85, 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, that's what you want. Like, it's great. He's great. Just because he's been great for a long time doesn't mean he's not still great. The points still count the same. It's not like, oh, well, they've never done it before, so here's a bonus because they hit their first 1,000-yard season. Who cares?
No, I think it's a fair point. And like I said, it's interesting that in this draft, maybe we just have 12 very smart drafters. I know 2 of them are here with me right now. You guys aren't so much falling for the trap because not only did Kincaid and Pitts not fall into that first group, they fell 2 rounds later, like almost a full round and a half before we even saw Pitts and Kincaid come off the board. Austin, I'm going to come back to you on Pitts as a Falcons fan. Pitts has put up numbers, 1,000-yard seasons. He's had trouble finding the end zone. He now gets Kirk Cousins, presumably for the entire season. Is Pitts more likely to break out than Dalton Kincaid? Dalton Kincaid is obviously riding the wave of no Stephon Diggs in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things playing in Kyle Pitts' favor this year. One, he had a clear quarterback upgrade, to your point. Two, he's at the age now and the amount of time in the league that traditionally most tight ends start to break out, right? Even guys like Travis Kelce weren't the top tight end their first 2 or 3 years in the league, nor was TJ Hawkinson. It often takes those tight ends 3 or 4 years to establish themselves as consistent players because they're learning two positions. They're learning how to beat NFL linebackers and oftentimes defensive backs in running routes, and they're also learning how to run block and run stuff some of the best defensive ends in the league. So they have their work cut out for them coming into the league. I think for a guy like Dalton Kincaid, he has the benefit of consistency with the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen coming back at quarterback. But my concern with him is Buffalo, it seems like every year they just kind of spread the ball around. Even last year when they had a clear number one target in Stephon Diggs, he wasn't just getting ridiculous volume all throughout the year. They were spreading the ball. They were trying to run the ball more. They have one of the best passers in the league, and they want it to be balanced and run the ball, right? Like they want to run with Josh Allen. So there's a lot more competition for a guy like Dalton Kincaid, whereas Kirk Cousins, he's going to sit in the pocket. He's going to look for Drake London. He's going to look for Kyle Pitts, and he's going to dump it off to Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. Very limited are reads that need to be made there. And the chat agrees with you guys. The absence of Diggs, according to Buy and Sell, does not automatically mean Kincaid is Kelce and that the swing has been wild on Kincaid. What's funny is, Austin, way back on our first show, I mentioned Kincaid among the elite young tight ends, and the chat went at me and they were like, Kincaid does not belong in that group. But now all of a sudden the ADP is saying Kincaid does belong in that group, but they've turned to me where I'm like, I don't think he belongs as high as he's going at this point. And Scamper says Curtis Samuel is going to be the first read in Buffalo. Before we get into some of the questions about the actual draft, I'd like to do a quick recap after 3 rounds. We started the draft before we started the show, so we have a lot more than 3 rounds, but I'm still only going to give you guys 3 rounds. As you know, we don't break down the entire draft, but I do like to give a recap of the first 3 rounds because I find that to be the most interesting. So the draft started off with Austin taking Josh Allen. It is a super flex draft. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey was an auto pick, Lamar Jackson, CeeDee Lamb, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, Joe Burrow round out the first round. Steve had the last pick, which means he has the first pick. He goes Kyler Murray, doubles up on quarterback. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Dak Prescott, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Bijan Robinson, A.J. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jordan Love, Marvin Harrison, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Kelce from Austin, backs it up with Brock Purdy grabbing his second quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, Caleb Williams, Garrett Wilson, Jared Goff, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert, Mark Andrews, and Trey McBride round out the first 3 rounds with tight ends. And Steve, I want to give you some credit. Of the draft boards I have seen, I always like to point out the color coding on StreamYard, and I'm sorry to our colorblind friends, but I like to point out the color coding. You have created a draft where this is the most diversified I have ever seen. Even in a super flex, there are a lot of quarterbacks going early on, but we still have a lot of running backs and even wide receivers going. And in the first half of this draft, almost everybody has drafted their tight end already. So kudos, Steve. You seem to have hit something with your scoring so far.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at that. I was like, man, look at this. Jake Ferguson went in the top half of a draft.
It's crazy.
That's wild, right? That's why I did the tight end premium, because I'm like, it's so much more interesting to add it in and create this different look. I love what I'm seeing in these first 3 rounds. The whole draft, really. I'm watching the whole thing.
I agree. Like I said, it really struck me. Normally, we've been doing Dynasty for so long. Normally it's all pink and blue at the top, and that is not what we're dealing with at this point. So like I said, you've accomplished what you set out for. Guys, this is going to sound weird. I don't always like to go quote unquote negative on a player, but I'm going to go negative a little bit about one of my players that was one of my favorite players, and that's Puka Nacua. I love Puka Nacua. I loved him coming in from the draft. I was one of the people beating the drum last year. I'm not a big college film grinder, so I didn't know all the measurables, but I'd heard great things after the Senior Bowl. There was every reason to like Puka Nacua, and I would have bet every dollar that my family has to its name against him being a top 10 pick after one good season. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. the only 5 wide receivers to go ahead of Puka Nacua. Steve, is he rising too far, too fast? I love the guy, but this seems like a little bit much.
No, he's not. So here's the thing, right? Like, so when you have a player that sets, like, again, I don't know why he's like considered like this non-sexy pick, but like he set the world on fire, like actually set it on fire last year. He became Cooper Kupp. And the question is, are we drafting him too early? Well, did you want to get in on Justin Jefferson early? Did you want to get in on Jamar Chase early? Did you want to get in on these guys who did not have as good of a rookie season as Puka Nacua did?
Yeah.
So maybe we should be looking at that and not thinking, why? Like, I just don't think he did it in the sexiest way. I don't think he had the gritty and he had like the 4.2 40 time and had all this stuff and the flash and the posh. The bottom line is he has Matt Stafford as his quarterback and Sean McVay as his head coach. That's where you draft him. You draft him early.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think the issue, Austin, is Matt Stafford isn't carrying the weight Matt Stafford used to carry. Now, Sean McVay, I feel like, is still carrying that weight. My biggest issue, and I agree with Steve, if this were a dynasty, you want to be in on Puka Nacua. Can he really beat his ADP? Are you going to get better than wide receiver 6 out of Puka Nacua?
I mean, he was wide receiver 4 last year. So you could. I don't hate his ADP. Now, I will admit, I don't take him as much as I probably should, because I kind of often it's based on team build. Like, I like to have AJ Brown up there, Jamar Chase in best ball in particular. I like to have, so I end up not taking Puka Nacua as much. But frankly, I think your Matthew Stafford fantasy lens is overtaking your Matthew Stafford NFL lens, because he can still sling a ball. He can still get the ball to Puka Nacua a ton. And I think similar to what we were talking about with the Falcons earlier, the target tree is really small. It's Puka Nacua, it's Cooper Kupp. Who's the tight end? They have a like backup tight end from last year that's going to be their starting tight end this year. So I think it's just a small target tree, and I think he's going to be a volume hog to the point that with a player like Nacua, sometimes I would say, like, get him in PPR, but not in half PPR, because he doesn't have the touchdown equity. He had 1,400 receiving yards last year. So like, he's getting the yardage, and he had 6 touchdowns, which is totally respectable. So I feel pretty comfortable with him. I do think that if your goal is to look for value, he's not the person to go for, to your point, Ryan. I think he is going close, at least close to his ceiling. I think it's more likely that a guy like Drake London or Chris Olave, you can get them at a discount and then be better than Nacua this year. But I'm not mad about anyone taking Nacua as the 6th overall receiver.
I was just going to say, I guess to both of your points, when you're in the first 2 rounds, aren't you taking everybody at their fucking ceiling? Like,
yes,
yeah,
you just want these guys to do what they're supposed to do. And to Steve's point, he's most likely to do what he's supposed to do. But Steve, you hit a point that I wanted to hit. You said he became Cooper Kupp. And I think I know which way you're going to go with this. Cooper Kupp now has fallen all the way to wide receiver 23 in ADP, and I haven't found him in this draft yet. I'll do it while you're talking. But he has fallen all the way to, has the rise of Nacua created a value for Cooper Kupp, Steve?
Yeah, probably. I mean, wide receiver 23, that seems low, right? Like, the wheels kind of did come off a little bit on Cooper Kupp, and it looks like age is catching up to him, and that happens to everybody, right? Like, he's no longer the number 1, but the number 2, like, remember when Robert Woods was there? Like, he was a good number 2. He was like a top 15 guy. Like, there's a real world that both of them get to eat, and Cooper Kupp has Matt Stafford's trust, so he's never going to be totally phased out of the game. I gotta tell you though, man, why do we love Drake London? I'm sorry to pivot. What is with this Drake London love? Like, I can't do it. Like, I'm done. I'm done with Drake London. Like, stop. Everyone brings him up. They're like, well, what a value. He sucks. That's why he's a value. He's trash. Like, that man can't separate at all. He's not open. Like, there's no world that Drake London has, like, going to come alive now. Like, it's just not going to happen.
I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to let Austin rebut because he's the Falcons fan. I disagree. I think the 30-year breakout could be real, certainly with a better quarterback. Austin, Drake London trash?
Like, are we drafting
question mark?
Tutu Atwell while we're at it? Like, what are we doing here? Like, let's just play
Okay.
this game. Rashad
Okay.
Bateman.
First of all, Drake London is two Atwells stacked on top of each other. They are very
Like,
different.
Take
players.
Rashad Bateman
say.
while you're at it. Keep buying, like, keep doing it. Like, it's fine.
Steve, no.
This is why we bring Steve on the shows for the tape.
Exactly.
Okay, hold up. Rashad Bateman is 6'1", 197. Drake London is 6'4", 213, and he's got a freaking wingspan that's like a 6-foot wingspan. You don't need to separate when you can just high point a ball over defenders.
And Auden Tate's 6'5", 220, and he didn't make it.
Kudos to Steve. You were the first one to hate on London in our show's history, and the chat is just eating it up right now.
Oh boy, this is the clip that is just going to start.
I was going to say this is the one, but we knew we were going to get that from Steve. For folks who've never tuned into our show before, I will eventually scroll the draft board. The first half of the draft is usually the most important part of the draft anyway. The draft is going on in the background. We talk about everything else. Austin, let's get back to Cooper. Actually, Steve, let's get back to Cooper Kupp. So wide receiver 22, he went wide receiver 22 in this draft. You kind of touched on this, but I'm just going to ask you point blank. As your second wide receiver, are you comfortable with Cooper Kupp, or do you feel better with him as a third after seeing, as you mentioned, injuries and age catching up with him last year?
I like him more as a flex. I don't like him as my wide receiver too.
Austin, same question.
It depends on my overall roster construction. If I'm going like anchor RB or like stacking running back to the beginning, I'll probably avoid Cooper Kupp because I'm relying on him too much to be in my lineup for the full 17 games. But if I'm going 0 RB or waiting a lot like I am in this draft, I'm more likely to take him because I'm going to get more elite receivers that I can have in my lineup for, I think, potentially when Cooper Kupp gets hurt. My concern with Kupp right now is the nature of his history. It's not, maybe I'm misremembering, but it's a hamstring injury. So lots of risk for non-contact injuries. And when receivers get to that age and they're struggling with hamstring injuries, it flares up a ton. It's one of the biggest issues in the NFL. NFL teams would love to solve the hamstring injury that prevented Julio Jones from aging the way that he could have aged given how good he was. And guys like Hollywood Brown have been, or not Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins have been in and out of the lineup for hamstring injuries. Like these elite receivers, once they get that hamstring tightness and their older age, it can really impact them. I fear that with Cooper Kupp. So I only want him when I have a ton of other receivers that I feel like can replace him.
I think it's a fair point. The one counterpoint I'm going to make to that argument is this is the exact stuff we were saying about Adam Thielen when he went into his age 30 season. Was he's an older wide receiver with hamstring issues and they tend to keep it going. And all he's done has been like a top 30 wide receiver every fucking season since he turned 30 years old. Obviously it hasn't always been the prettiest, but I think there's also something to, his breakfast buddy, Matt Stafford, is the quarterback. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if they continue to lean on one another. I'm going to stick with the Rams for one more question. I am struggling to find where this guy was drafted. The fun of doing mock drafts live. Kyren Williams is on this draft board somewhere. That's right. He actually went in the first, 3-8. Steve, I wanted to ask about Kyren Williams. It's not really being noted as much that he is coming into training camp a little bit banged up. Nothing that says it's going to be a major injury, but he's coming in a little bit banged up. But they also put some draft capital in Blake Corum. Are you a believer in Blake Corum coming in? Should we be a little bit more concerned about taking Kyren Williams in the first 3 rounds of a Superflex draft when he's already hurt and has actual competition this year?
Yeah, we should. Like another guy, like volume was king for Kyren Williams, right? Like Kyren Williams runs the same 40 I do, and it's not fast, right? Like that's the first issue you have with him, right? He's not going to bust anything long. He's really relying on touchdowns. His yards per carry was kind of garbage.
Touchdowns carried him last year. There is
maybe it happens again, but like Blake Corum's a good running back, and Sean McVay has already come out and said in the past that he doesn't want to do the whole Todd Gurley thing again, where they invest in this one guy and he's the guy and he runs them into the ground, right? Like Kyren Williams, is not Todd Gurley. He's not that talented. He's good, like whatever, great year, flash in the pan, like great. But Blake Corum's there now, and now it's going to be a 1-2 punch. And frankly, I think Corum's a better runner. So Kyren Williams came out of college as a pass catcher.
Exactly that. Because that was the thing I was going to kind of add to this was he was supposed to be a surprise Austin Eckler last year. He certainly wasn't supposed to be getting Todd Gurley comps after 2 years in the league.
Right. No, and that's like at Notre Dame, he was a pass catching back. I don't even think he was the main runner at Notre Dame. Like it just, to me, he just screams trap. And his ADP is very reflective of that.
Certainly in a trap phase. Austin, you've been doing a ton of best ball drafts. What are your thoughts on Williams going into these drafts? Because like I said, his injury has not been getting the publicity. I don't even remember what he's dealing with. I think it's a foot injury. And then you could argue, like Chris Molina wrote an article about Williams talking about how he's an underrated pass blocker, but most of the places I see grade him as a pass blocker, he's not very good at it. So
yeah, I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel about Kyren Williams in best ball, because I'm going to look at my exposure to him right now. And I'm going to say right now, I'm pretty confident it's 0 because I think it's more about his ADP. Like I think he can be, I took him 7% of the time in my
2 drafts,
3 drafts in the pre-draft best ball. I've not taken him any since the draft happened.
Okay.
And for reference, that was like 41 drafts. So I took him 3 times out of 41.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, I'm going to take him at some point because I'm doing so many drafts, but I'm not taking him a ton at a ceiling. And I think exactly for the reason that Steve was mentioning, he is really dependent on touchdowns. Those were on underdog fantasy. So touchdowns actually matter more than catches. But I'm not taking him a ton in my leagues unless he falls. Like, I don't know, 3rd round here in a Superflex, that's not quite falling enough for me. I think you're better off doing what Griff Girl did and getting Travis Etienne in the 4th round. Like, I feel like there's more upside there. And there's a safer floor in some ways. So I agree. I'm just nervous about the ADP, but overall, I mean, like, I think I will say I don't trust Sean McVay. I feel like we've heard this before.
Oh, Sean McVay's a bold-faced liar. But
like he said this before, where he's like, "We're not going to do the thing where we run them into the ground," and then we see Kyren Williams last year get run into the ground, get hurt, miss some games. So I'm not really buying into the coach speak, but I also don't like the ADP.
I love that this show started off 15 minutes of the most positive message, and I have just taken us down the most negative fucking path, along with Steve just destroying Drake London.
All right, I want to get back to this because I got to highlight Drake London right now.
It's incredible.
4-4 ahead of Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman. What are we doing here? What kind of absolute clown show is going on in Atlanta that has people buying into this? Like, it's like the circus. Like, look over here.
Okay, hold on.
Drake London. It's like,
hold on. Well, first of all, Austin, after the Michael Penix pick, clown show is a perfectly acceptable description of the Atlanta.
Okay, there's no need for that.
Actually, I want to save it because you brought up Michael Pittman, and that's going to play into 2 questions from now. But guess what? I want to get into quarterback talk, and I crafted this question 100% with Steve. It is time for today's Keep Trade Cut. Surprise you guys with it every show. Steve, I always make Austin answer first so that the guest, I think you guys are going to have similar answers, but I want you to spend some time talking about these quarterbacks. Steve loves mobile quarterbacks. If you followed him for any period of time, if you've seen his rankings, they shoot up his rankings. So I want to talk about 3 guys who I think he probably really likes: Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, and Jaden Daniels. So basically the first Lamar, the second Lamar, and the third Lamar. I want you guys to keep trade cut these mobile quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, Austin.
Easy. Keep Lamar
Jackson. I thought
Jackson.
It might be, but I want you to talk about them a little bit. So
yeah, we're keeping Lamar Jackson. Come on. 2-time MVP. I am not getting rid of that man. He will retire on my roster.
Okay.
I'm trading Anthony Richardson because he has the highest ranking among most analysts between him and Jaden Daniels. I'm cutting Jaden Daniels because I just don't trust. I don't trust it. I think, when has Washington developed a good quarterback?
This is a new team, though. I'll give you that, but it's not like this is the same Washington. for reference, Lamar Jackson went at the 6 of this draft. Richardson went at the 9. Daniels went 2 full rounds later. Fizzle Dollars obviously in on the Steve way of drafting. Anthony Richardson and Jaden Daniels are his 2 quarterbacks so far. Steve, same question. I know you're big on Jaden Daniels because you're also a Florida State guy. I don't know why I brought up Jaden Daniels. That's LSU, but never mind. Regardless.
I nodded anyway. I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, mobile quarterbacks I know you're in on. So is your answer the same? Would you do anything? Would you bet on the upside of Jaden Daniels?
So I do bet on the upside of Jaden Daniels. I actually was in a draft where I had the 101 dynasty draft, and I took Jaden Daniels instead of Caleb Williams. So I'm very, very in on Jaden Daniels as a player. I will say,
compared to other runners,
compared to the other runners, I think I would go the same way Austin did. I think I'd keep Lamar, trade Richard. That hurt, man. That's hard because I think there's a real case that all 3 of them could be the QB1 this year, and I wouldn't be sure. The one where I'm really like struggling is I'd always take Lamar first, but I'm torn because Jaden Daniels I think is a better thrower than Richardson.
Fair.
And I think he has better wide receivers.
Steve, just agree with me on this one thing.
I was going to say, here's why I think you should agree. Because the whole point of keep trade cut is trading the guy with high value. And Anthony Richardson's value is insane right now.
So I'd have to cut Daniels, trade Richardson because trying to trade for him in any league is impossible.
Yeah, 100%. And I would actually do this the exact same way you guys would. I would be tempted if I liked either of the other 2 better. Lamar, I think, has great trade value as well. But I'm, again, turning into an Anthony Richardson hater. More about the situation, just so many unknowns. I'm certainly keeping Lamar, but I want to actually get you guys to dig in more on Anthony Richardson. Moving over to Steve, you brought up Michael Pittman when you were talking about Drake London. So immediately you put Pittman ahead of London-ish with what you were saying. Pittman was the wide receiver 13 last season. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 14 this season on 156 targets with a non-mobile Gardner Minshew running the show. Now we have Anthony Richardson. Should we be worried about a dip in targets, or would this be something where we expect Michael Pittman to be hyper-targeted in Indianapolis? Steve.
I think you'll see a dip in targets, but you'll see an increase in the value of targets. I think it's kind of one of those situations that, Gardner Minshew is not going to go and run the ball all that much. And he could, he's not that good of a thrower. He's not a really good quarterback. He's kind of a detriment to his wide receivers. But Anthony Richardson, you got this guy throwing the ball, and he can fit it into a window that's the size of a football. Yeah. And that guy plays with no fucks given. He'll be like, Michael Pittman's triple cover, don't care. Let's let it zing. Michael Pittman may hit double-digit touchdowns this year with Anthony Richardson. And
you do expect a boost in efficiency.
Right. I expect his efficiency to be better, the downfield targets to be better. I think all that stuff's going to happen for Michael Pittman. I really like Michael Pittman this year. I think he's going to beat his ADP of wide receiver 14. I actually have him probably in the top 10.
So I'm just quickly counting. I think he went as the 15 in this draft. So obviously a value to Steve. Austin, I normally would want to hate on him, and he probably isn't my wide receiver 15 in my rankings. I haven't looked at him in a while. But what's interesting is when I look at the names that go after him, I'm also not in a rush to grab any of those names at wide receiver specifically. It almost feels like maybe the 4th round is where we're starting, at least in Superflex drafts, to hit a kind of wide receiver dead zone, at least for my personal preference, Austin.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I will say Kevin at the 2 spot has been on and off of the old auto pick. And so he actually auto picked Michael Pittman, which maybe he would have done anyways. But I was hoping that Michael Pittman fell because that was kind of where the direction I was going. I think you could go a little bit further than Michael Pittman. I don't think he's the end of the dead zone. I feel really good about Nico Collins and Jalen Waddle getting them afterwards. So, but I do think there's a little bit of a dip there just because of the sheer amount of volume. I do have minor concerns about increased competition for targets with them drafting Adonai Mitchell. And I think Josh Downs, getting some more time in the league, and Anthony Richardson, he's going to run the ball more. There's all the signs that could point towards him getting a lower volume, but I still think he's the clear number 1 in that offense. And at least will be a good wide receiver 2 for your team in fantasy football.
I want to get a comment up on the screen here. Austin, you may have gotten the value of the draft. Scampers just let us know that T. Higgins has signed his franchise tender and is likely, he could still be traded, but likely to play the 2024 season with Cincinnati, but inevitably will be playing the 2024 season. So you got him late while there was still some blood in the water there, and now things seem to be clearing up. I want to talk a little bit more about the second half of the draft. So I'm actually going to scroll the screen a little bit. We have finished the draft. Thank you to everybody who drafted with us. The show goes on for a little bit longer. But Austin, one of the things I wanted to look at was the number of quarterbacks. I see a lot of teams taking 4, and some even, I believe, took 5, but at least 4. You have been someone who I've talked with about best ball the most, and you've always talked about, quarterback builds. How much does that change in Superflex? In a Superflex league where 2 of your quarterbacks are likely to start every week, do you need to walk out with 4 quarterbacks? Is 3 still fine? How does that play into your build there, Austin?
It depends a little bit on the bye weeks. I wasn't paying attention to that as I was going through. I think it should be 3 or 4, but it's like with any best ball draft, I'm not going to force it if the opportunity cost is bad, right? Like I'm not going to just get 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds and kill the rest of my team. Like I'm not going to overly weight it, but I do want to have a couple of guys who I think have high ceilings sort of later in the draft. 3 is fine, but also I don't do a ton of super flex basketball because they are actually, to me, they're really challenging leagues. I think some people have some good success with them, but they can be hard because you have to really get the quarterback build right to hit your ceiling on that because of how impactful those players can be.
And Steve, I'm just going to have you continue with that. While you did make a league where everyone's included, and we can see that again in the second half of this draft, look at all the tight ends. The tight end premium, man, made sure they were going. I did go back and check. I misspoke. 1 team took 4 quarterbacks. Nobody took 5. But you do have a league now, Steve, where everybody is loading up on these quarterbacks to the point where at the end of the draft, we're seeing Spencer Rattler and Aiden O'Connell still being drafted. Like people just want that piece. Michael Penix, who probably isn't going to play this year, Jacoby Brissett, and Sam Howell, who might only play a few games. People were really loading up on quarterbacks. Is that a viable strategy for Rainbow Bowl that you need to probably walk out with 3 to 4 quarterbacks?
Well, it was my build. I'm the one who drafted Spencer Rattler and Aiden O'Connell. So, So early
I didn't even notice that when I said it.
So I kind of build it this way: is I usually go quarterback early, especially at the 12 where I had that turn. And I was like, okay, Burrow fell. I was like, great. And then Kyler fell, and I was like, perfect. It lets you draft everything else in between, knowing you have 2-star quarterbacks, right? And then from there, I was like, realistically, I don't expect quarterbacks to miss too much time usually. It happens, and you kind of have to live with it if it does. But like then late in the draft, what I love to do, my build is always draft backup quarterbacks that may very well be better than the starter. And Derek Carr is not good, and Gardner Minshew, as I've said, is not good. And Aiden O'Connell actually looked pretty competent in that offense last year after Antonio Pierce took over. There's a real world where he is the starter. They didn't draft one. Like, there's no way they're sitting there saying, we signed Gardner Minshew to a backup's salary. We 100% have our franchise quarterback. Like, there's no way they're sitting there saying that the job is absolutely locked in his. They didn't pay him like it was. So Aiden O'Connell felt like a good pick there. I don't really love anything else on the board. Jatavian Sanders maybe was on my radar, but like other than that, like I'm pretty happy taking flyers on quarterbacks late.
Austin, a similar situation to Kyren Williams is Javonte Williams, and there our Drew Metcalf just wrote a really nice article about Williams. However, there was a beat reporter recently, Cecil Lamney, who works with Football Guys, who said of the competition that Jaleel McLaughlin is working a lot more with the first team and threw out that Javonte Williams may not make the team, which I think is bananas. So you have a 9th round grade here on Javonte Williams going at 9.6. Jaleel McLaughlin goes 14.4. What do you make of some of these ambiguous running back situations? And are you surprised to hear that Denver might be one of those situations?
I'm sort of surprised that Denver is one of those situations, although I feel like they've been ambiguous for the past couple of years, in part because of injuries. What I make of them is you take you make your statement on what you think about that backfield, and you take advantage of the value there. Like usually these ambiguous backfields, the players fall further down the board. And so then you can take stances on, I think this is going to be the number one running back for this team, and there can be great value had there. Like Jaleel McLaughlin going in the 14th round of this draft, that could be incredible value if he does indeed end up being the RB1. And this is the time of year where you kind of got to do that, right? You've got to take advantage of having more information than the people in your draft room. And if you have a clear player stance like that, you should take it, especially if you have a build that gives you some safety elsewhere. Like Fizzle Dollars has Jalen Warren and Devin Singletary. Those are two guys that I think are going to have a pretty solid role in their backfields, regardless of what happens. And so then taking a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyrone Tracy as another example who have some high upside, could potentially become the number one running back, is a really good strategy, particularly in best ball, where you can't just spend all of your fab dollars on whatever running back pops after week one.
Steve, I'm actually going to keep Fizzle highlighted here, not just about the Denver running back situation, but I believe, if I'm seeing this correctly, our only 0 running back drafter. Starts off with 2 quarterbacks and 5 wide receivers before taking his first tight end, and then grabs his 3rd quarterback before finally taking his first running back, Jalen Warren. And I think Fizzle Dollars really hammered the ick at running back, where people don't know what to make of backfields like Denver and Pittsburgh. Nobody wants to like Devin Singletary, but he's the starter. Chicago's another ambiguous backfield, and then he has Tyrone Tracy to kind of back up Singletary. What do you feel about a build like this where he waited forever at running back? It is a best ball format, so as long as he has people who are going to play, it's going to work out well. But my goodness, he walks out with some real nice quarterback and wide receiver talent. So you hate Drake London.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, honestly, if you can pull it off the way he pulled it off, you're gonna do great. Outside of Drake London that he really fumbled the bag with, like, you know, you slot in Mike Evans or DJ Moore there.
Yeah. Even
really
Chris Olave a pick later.
Give me Brandon Ayuk. Chris Olave I'd like more because at least he goes over 1,000 yards. Drake London's like a 700-yard receiver. He's trash. But like, yeah, if you can stumble into Jalen Warren and Devin Singletary in the double-digit rounds, like,
yeah,
sure. I mean, like,
I would be obscenely nervous going into a season with those as my running backs. Especially,
I'm nervous, but honestly, you're expecting the top half to carry you. Who do you get as his first tight end? Is it Jake Ferguson? Is that where he ended up?
Yeah, that was the first tight end. Yep,
that was the first tight end. So in a tight end premium, you probably want to slot out Drake London. Not to like harp on Drake London, but realistically, you do. You want to slot probably him out for like a better tight end, like a Evan Ingram, right? Like he probably would have been the pick there. But Jake Ferguson could very well pop, and if he does, I think those running backs probably will do well enough to get the job done. And if McLaughlin does end up being the running back one in Denver, he very well may win the league.
This is a great time to ask this question. We're so used to saying best ball, like how we do it on Underdog. Steve, will there be waivers in Rainbow Bowl?
There will.
Okay, so that changes things quite a bit because there's an entirely different strategy. I play in a dynasty like that, and I feel like the teams that remember there are waivers and do them end up dominating every single year. So...
Yeah, no, it'll be a fab system. You will have fab. It's the whole, you know, I try to keep it as flexible and as moving there. I don't think there's going to be trading. I'm trying to figure that out. Like I said, one thing I do want to preface all of this with is this is my first year running this, and it's just me. So I'm figuring some stuff out. But you're playing against the field too. So don't just think it's your league. It's not just the 12 you're against. It is the whole 120 right now.
And I want to
give
a shout out. Primetime Mock signed up for it, so you picked up another one today. Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
You love to see it.
If I have enough people and I have enough time and I have the wherewithal to do it, I'll open more leagues. I mean, it's not closed till the season starts. All right. I'll say that.
And the last thing I want to get into before I have you guys break down your teams, there's a player I noticed that went super late in this draft. And when I look at the players around him, I feel like there's insane value there. Am I wrong, Austin? Joshua Palmer. When I look at the wide receivers that went in the last 3 rounds, it's all these very unproven rookies. Josh Downs is there, Demario Douglas. But for the most part, it's a lot of unproven guys. Josh Palmer has a built-in chemistry, and he's the only wide receiver on the team, basically, who's played any significant time with Justin Herbert, yet he's going in the 16th round of this best ball draft for BroCal. I think that's good value, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically Drake London, right?
Yes.
They put up the same stats. Like, tell me I'm wrong.
Yes.
Just
Austin,
one of them's the number 3 wide receiver on a team, and the other one is apparently a wide receiver 1.
And one cost you a 6th round pick, the other cost you a 16th round pick.
Here's some facts. Josh Palmer had 581 receiving yards in 2023. My man Drake London had 900. So just throwing that one out there.
The most Drake. I'm gonna have to have Josh go back and change the thumbnail. This is the most Drake London episode ever, though it's not a pro Drake London episode.
To your point, though, I do think there is a value on Josh Palmer right now, in part because, like, who the heck are the other receivers? Like, getting him in the 16th round is really good to me. I like that. And honestly, like, when I'm doing best ball drafts in general, I kind of like attacking the Los Angeles Chargers receivers because they still have freaking Justin Herbert throwing them the ball, and all of his receivers are free. Like Quentin Johnston, I don't think he's good, but he's actually ranked where I had him ranked last year at this point, and he's going in the 14th round. So, like, at that value, like, why not take the risk? Because he's going to be free, and you're not relying on him to be your every week wide receiver 1. So, yes, I think all of the Chargers players in general are at values right now.
And Steve, just to continue that before I have you break down your team, you mentioned you mentioned Palmer as the wide receiver 3. Do you think he does come into the season behind Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston then?
I think he was the wide receiver 3 last year. I think he's probably going to be
the
wide
receiver
I
get what you're saying. My apologies.
Yeah, I think he'll probably be the wide receiver 2 there. Because I don't think Quentin Johnston has quite earned. Maybe he makes the leap. I thought Quentin Johnston looked decent. I think he looked a little shell-shocked last year that the NFL was as fast as it is. But maybe he gets a little bit of strong. He was kind of a string bean. Hopefully he puts on some weight and can kind of throw his body around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really love the Chargers' whole pass catching situation. It's Jim Harbaugh. I mean, they're going to throw the ball like 20 times a game.
There's that as well. So yeah, that's always a concern. All right, we have reached the point in the show where I have these guys break down their drafts. Steve, you obviously should know Rainbow Bowl scoring better than anyone else. I want you to let us know, did you have a strategy? Was that strategy forced to change? Was there significance in picking the 12th spot?
So I wanted to pick in the 12th spot so I could get that turn. And
Okay.
it was basically, let me see how the first round plays out. And if my guys fall to me there, I can go quarterback. And my hope was that someone like Burrow and Murray and Dak would fall to me. Thankfully, all 3 did. I passed on Dak because I wanted a runner. I got Kyler.
Yeah.
So that was where I went from there. I knew I wanted the tight end. I wanted the tight end premium. And I wanted one of the guys that was going to have that high value in tight end premium. So I went with Trey McBride. I just think he's that dude out there. From there, it was just target monsters, right? And it was Devontae Adams, it was Devonta Smith. I think Keon Coleman will eat up targets. And then Chris Godwin's moving back to the slot this year. That's such a great spot for him. I'm so excited. People sleep on Chris Godwin, and anyone who's followed me for any amount of time in the fantasy football space, my draft is not surprising for the 4 out of the, there's a bunch of picks, and like Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's going to go fill that role that Adam Thielen had last year in Carolina, be the de facto number 1. Look how well it worked out for Mike Evans in that system. It's going to be a monster year for Deontay Johnson. Finally having, I wish he went somewhere with a better quarterback, but I think it's going to be fine. He'll do Deontay Johnson things and probably score more touchdowns. And then I was psyched to get Trey Benson at the 10. Yeah. That I think he's the number 1 running back. And it'll, at the very least, be a Thunder and Lightning, Kamara, Ingram kind of pairing there. And then I got my guy Antonio Gibson in the 13th round.
I'd say Antonio Gibson, the least surprising pick of all of your picks.
It's my guy. I love him with all my heart. So
the one thing I noticed about your build, and I think Austin did something similar, and a lot of folks have, only 4 running backs. Is that going to, especially I guess with waivers and the churn of running backs in the NFL, is that going to be the ideal build, is to get the higher value wide receivers, get the running backs that make sense like you did with Joe Mixon, not pictured here, but then Trey Benson, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, get the ones that make sense, but then just be ready to churn that roster spot as injuries happen?
I think so, because honestly, wide receivers have the higher variance. I feel like there's not very often that the number 3 running back pops off at 30 points, but Jameson Williams very well could, right? yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to pop off, but Jameson Williams will have that random 150-yard, 2-touchdown game. And in best ball, that's so key.
Yeah. One last thing I forgot to bring up before, there's also a Rainbow Bowl shirt. So Steve, while I have you here, let people know how they can get that. I have the link in the description.
Yeah. So basically you click the link. Someone reached out to me and I want to give them their credit as much as I can, because when she reached out to me, she was like, hey, do you mind if I make a shirt? And I was like, this is so great. Her name is Susan. She's incredible. She's SK.
Oh no.
Kyren, Curan on Twitter. She reached out to me, came up with a shirt and came up with the design and this logo. And it was just this beautiful thing. We talked about it and put it out. I'm so excited. I can't believe this merch. I didn't think I'd ever create something that had like
awesome.
merch to it.
So yeah, we dropped the link for Gridiron Goddess. Can you give that Twitter handle one more time? Your internet went out as you were giving the credit. So
yeah, it's SKACURRAN, SKA Kyren for Susan. And so she's incredible. Gridiron Goddess. She's absolutely that. So her name, she lives up to her name.
That's awesome. And then Josh even pointed out that her work on IG is also awesome. So Gridiron Goddess, make sure you guys are looking out for it there. Austin, you know the deal. Talk about who you want to talk about, who you want to talk about. Don't talk about who you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna also address a question in the chat as I go through this. So Primetime Fantasy asks, how do we feel about the waivers and how it would affect draft strategy for best ball? So I went with a 4-quarterback build. I started with Josh Allen because how can you not in a Superflex league, and then Brock Purdy just to have someone kind of safe early on. If I had known about the waiver situation coming into this draft, I might have stopped there and I might have not drafted another quarterback the rest of this league because I could just kind of wait and spend a bunch of fab when I needed to throughout the season to figure out who that next quarterback is. Maybe I still would have gotten Will Levis, but I probably would not have drafted Sam Howell then. I would have only
you would have took a lottery ticket at that last pick. So.
Yeah, I would have only drafted people that I know are going to be starters. So
there you go, folks. Unlike Austin, know what you're dealing with when you go into your draft.
That's fair.
That's the point of the show. Let's be clear. So.
That is the point of the show. The other thing that would have changed, so I did do a 4 running back build. One of those was actually an auto pick. I did not mean to get J.K. Dobbins, but I'm not mad about it. I probably also would have only taken 2 or 3 running backs for a very similar reason. I would have waited for the first couple of weeks to pay out, and then I would have paid big on my fab for the first couple of weeks to get the running back that I felt like I needed, if there was one. So I think that's one big thing that would have shifted. And I probably would have taken more dart throws because there's one of the benefits of best ball is I feel like with the waiver situation, you're not stuck with these players. So you're going to have a lower chance of wasted roster spots. And at that point, if there's someone towards like when you're at those bottom 3 rounds, if there's some players that are way down on ADP that are going to end up on the waivers, I would just go ahead and take the stance on them so that you beat everyone to the punch and you don't have to compete for those fab dollars. So I probably would have been even more aggressive towards the end of the draft. And I would have done a little bit of a different roster construction, but overall I liked my team. And, I thought of this as like, this is going to be my team for the year. And I'm pretty happy with that, but the waivers would have changed just a little bit.
I want to just question you on one player specifically. Austin Eckler falling all the way to the 10th round. Obviously, we are 2 years removed from him being a fantasy football god. It's not like he was completely awful last year. And 10th round feels like an obscene value in any league that values any sort of PPR.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was the running back 26 in PPR, and he missed some time and was often in and out of games because he was hurt. So I feel like he easily he can pay off his ADP in round 10. And I think it's a super nice value, and he still has a nose for the end zone. I don't have a ton of concerns there.
Yeah. Guys, that's going to wrap it up. I don't have an oops of the draft, to be honest. I had way too much fun talking with you guys. Apparently the oops was taking Drake London. We all should have just skipped him according to Steve.
Just drop him. Like, he's a free agent at best.
No. Don't drop him. Just trade him to me. I'll take all of your Drake London shares.
Just trash.
I love that. But just so you're aware, 2/3 of the show does not hate Drake London. One third does. I do want to point out someone in the chat says they feel that trading in these types of leagues it makes it a little hard to regulate. So Steve, they would recommend not adding trading just because you mentioned it's your first year. Just a little advice from the wisdom of the crowds there. Steve, this was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was hot takes, but it was a big focus on Rainbow Bowl and this beautiful thing that you've created. Please let people know where they can find your work. I'm not quite sure if you're doing anything with IBT right now. I know you've been putting out a ton of rankings lately, but Rainbow Bowl has taken up a lot of your time.
Rainbow Bowl has taken up a ton of my time, but I am still with IBT Media, and I want to give a shout out to my IBT family. I love them so much. They've been so wonderful with all of this. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Steve_Lawson93. It's right there on my little banner. And you're going to find Rainbow Bowl stuff. You're going to find a lot of movie stuff. You're going to find fantasy football stuff because I write a lot about like entertainment for IBT. I love just being a part of it. Reach out to me if you ever want to talk fantasy or if you want to talk Rainbow Bowl. I'm always happy to talk and chat.
And I saw you tweet this morning. I want to make sure we get as much promotion out there for you as well. You're doing another mock draft for Rainbow Bowl with someone else tomorrow, correct?
Yes. So I am doing one with, oh boy, let me.
I am sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Oh no, I know. Like I'm with someone else again. Like I have where is it? Oh yeah. So I'm doing with Fantasy Football Universe.
Yes.
So yeah, I blanked it, but yeah, we're doing Fantasy Football Universe. I'm doing another one tomorrow, and we're actually giving away a spot in Rainbow Bowl. So if you're not in and you want to get in, come on over.
There you go. And I just dropped the interest form in the chats one last time. Austin, what do you got going on, my friend?
Yeah, kind of same thing as usual. You can always check me out at clubfantasyffl.com and on our YouTube page. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. Be on the look for some best ball content coming up and also for all of my Carolina Panthers coverage at Last Word on NFL.
Perfect. I didn't want to take anything away from the Rainbow Bowl today, so I didn't really mention our partnership with Dynasty Nerds. But if you sign up for Dynasty Nerds and use promo code Club Fantasy, you will get 15% off of your order. It's been on the ticker for the entire show. We appreciate if you guys want to do that, but go sign up for Rainbow Bowl. That's the big focus here. Listen, Club Fantasy is now going live six times a week, and we are looking to add number 7. So there is literally no reason for you not to just subscribe to the damn channel. We just recently crossed 1,000 followers. We're trying to make it to 2,000 followers. We cover redraft, we cover dynasty, we cover best ball, and we even have mock drafts like today's to help you get better at any sort of fantasy league. We even have a golf show. You need to get subscribed to us. We're going to be back mock drafting on Monday. That's Mocking with the Stars with Jay and Chris. But don't forget, we now have our newest mock draft show, Mock Girl Summer. That is every Thursday during the summer with Wendy Early and Julia Papworth. That's way too many vowels in a row. Messed me up there. Wendy and Julia are hosting Mock Girl Summer. That's going to be on Thursdays. This upcoming Wednesday on our flagship show, no pun intended, we are going to be covering the Raiders, Saints, and Colts as we continue our Look Inside series, and we're going to have Matt Donnelly from Dynasty Vipers on with us. That has been the show. We appreciate every single one of you who tuned in, asked questions, and drafted with us. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you at the next mock draft.